now!
Hello, this is Billy Core from the Nostalgia Mall, and Merry Christmas Eve, everyone. Every year on Christmas Eve, we try and do something a little special, and this year will be no different. Today, we're going to be looking at another Toys R Us catalog. Now, I've shown some Christmas catalogs in the past from Toys R Us, and unfortunately, I've kind of run out of options. However, a couple of months ago, I came across a slightly smaller Toys R Us catalog dating from October 9th, 1994. So I snatched it up, and today we're going to take a look at the goodies within. Starting on page 1, here are some supposedly super values sold only at Toys R Us. Now, I never had any of these, especially the dolls, but I do remember those radio control cars like on the bottom right of the page. I had a few growing up, but all of them were absolute junk. The radio range was terrible, and they would only work if I walked directly behind them. Yeah, I wasn't really a fan. The first half or so of the catalog are coupons, and the ones mentioned on this page are some we'll take a look at later, but I felt obligated to include at least one of the coupon pages. These coupons expired on November 5th, 1994, so if you want to save $3 on Fleas on Fred, just forget it. I'm a man, despite what some people believe, so I didn't own any of the dolls on this page, but for the girls watching, here's one of the pages featuring toy dolls, all of which I do recall seeing advertised on TV when I was younger. Now here's something I always wanted to own as a kid. These were McDonald's Happy Meal makers by Mattel. I have always had an unusual fascination with retro McDonald's related items like this. McDonald's has changed so much since '94 that it seems like a different place in a way. Now as for the toys, I never had any of the McDonald's toys in this catalog, but I do vaguely remember having something similar, but unlike these, it didn't make any food. Anyone have any of these? Would love to hear. I was kind of surprised to see Teddy Ruxpin still being sold in 1994, but here it is. It would not surprise me though if they didn't last much longer after this. Also on the bottom right is the Talking Barney, a toy I did have as a kid. I'm sort of ashamed to admit this, but back then I was obsessed with Barney. Please, hold your laughter. 1994 was the year that Lion King made its original debut, and you couldn't go anywhere without seeing Lion King related merchandise. I actually remember seeing The Lion King when it was originally in theaters back in the summer of 1994. I saw it at the Circle 6 theaters at Carolina Circle Mall. I never knew at the time how big a hit of this movie was going to become. Also on this page are Looney Tunes action plushes. I vaguely remember having a Bugs Bunny toy like this, but I don't remember if I did or not. Ah yes, the famous Bumbleball, a toy that was enormously popular back in 1994. I still remember my dad taking me to every toy store in Greensboro trying to find one of these when it first came out, but nobody had them. They were that popular. Eventually we did find one, and I was finally at peace. Too bad I grew bored of it after a few minutes. Sorry, Dad, I didn't mean for you to spend that kind of money on something I didn't use. Ugh. On the top left of this page is the Fisher-Price Flip Track Road and Rail, which my uncle got for me for Christmas in 1994. This was a plastic railroad track where if you flipped it over, it would change from a railroad to a regular road. I was quite fond of building my own rail and road systems as a kid, so I obviously had a ton of fun with that toy. Because this catalog was released in October, it features a few Halloween costumes. I can't remember if I ever got any costumes at Toys R Us as a kid. Heck, I don't even remember what my costume was in 1994. Now this page features a Lion King Simba costume and a Power Rangers costume. I didn't really need to tell you that, but there you go. I've got to say something, or else this video will just be completely silent, and you wouldn't want that, would you? Maybe you would. I don't know. Anyway, let's continue. Anyone else find these Sesame Street costumes kind of creepy? It looks like those kids gutted Big Bird and Elmo and are wearing their skin. That's sickening! The bottom left of this page shows the Fisher-Price 3-in-1 tournament table, which was a toy that had a built-in pool table, table tennis, and glide hockey table. Fisher-Price also had a similar item at this time, not shown here for some reason, called the Triple Arcade, that had a built-in basketball hoop, skee-ball table, and air hockey table. I always wanted one of those, especially the Triple Arcade, but never got it. This page features some building sets, including a Lego fire station, back when Lego sets were a lot more simple. Back then I always wanted to play with Legos, but my parents wouldn't let me have Legos until I was about 8 or 9, which makes sense, they were for kids 8 or up. And this page also has Kinects, which were still a new thing at the time. It's hard to believe. Here are some electronic learning toys that were popular back then, the most interesting being the Sega Pico at the bottom, which was a game console designed for very young children. I never had one, and I think they're kind of rare these days. Also at the top right is the VTech Talking Whiz Kid laptop, probably the most famous of the toy laptops of the 90s. Now I've heard of the VTech video painter, but I never knew about the Mickey Mouse version of it until I got this catalog. Also featured are some Tiger electronic diaries so you could write about how cute your dress was at school today. Okay, I promise I will never do that voice again. Yeesh. I never knew this existed, but this page features something called the Fisher-Price Perfect Shot Camera, which is supposedly a film camera designed for children. If I'd known that existed back then, I would have been begging my parents for that camera non-stop. I didn't start taking real pictures on a real camera until 1997 when my parents started getting me those cheap disposable cameras from the drugstore. Also on this page is the Fisher-Price tape recorder, which we saw in the Sears catalog video last week. The next two pages feature some VHS tapes, something not many people remember Toys R Us selling back then. What stands out to me on this page are the spot tapes. My dad would buy me the spot tapes and books when I was about 6 years old, and they included those tapes. Also interesting are the Barney tapes at the bottom. Again, I'm ashamed to admit that I had all 4 of those. Again, hold your laughter, please. Here's some more VHS tapes, which include the Power Rangers. Now, I never got into Power Rangers, but I do remember playing with some kids at school back in 1995, pretending to be Power Rangers just to fit in. Also on this page at the top right are some golden sing-along books. I had a bunch of these growing up, and I remember never reading them, but always pressing the buttons to see what kind of sounds they'd make. I still have my 101 Dalmatians talking book from when I was a kid. I think I showed it in a video once, but I can't remember. This is the board game section of the catalog featuring my old friend Mr. Bucket, which I got for Easter in 1994, another toy I wanted for quite some time. And this is another toy I would love to have in my retro toy collection someday if I can ever find one. I see 3 things on this page that I had. First of all, at the top left is the Little Tikes Cozy Coupe, which I got for my 2nd birthday in 1991. But the most interesting is the Little Tikes minivan at the top right, which I got for my 5th birthday in 1994. I remember getting it that day and being sad that I couldn't ride it outside because it was raining that day. But just like the Cozy Coupe, I drove that minivan everywhere. The reason I loved it so much was quite simple. It was blue! I was obsessed with the color blue. Also at the bottom left is the Power Wheels Jeep, which looks very similar to the one I had as a kid. I've said this before, but I think it was a requirement back then for every kid to have at least one toy fire truck. I think I had a couple, but I don't remember ever having a yellow one like on this page. Probably more famous for its commercials than the actual toy was Creepy Crawlers, which can be seen on the bottom right. On the bottom left is the Hasbro Real Power Tool Shop, something I always wanted, but I think my parents were too scared that I'd chop a finger off. Okay, it's now a tradition to show these in videos like this, so here they are once again, the Tiger handheld games. What's interesting is they also seem to have had casino-style handheld games. Well, anyway, you know the drill. The Tiger games are absolute junk and not worth the $20 they were asking for. Moving on. Alright, we're once again in the video game section, and we're starting off with the Nintendo Game Boy, which was being sold for a somewhat reasonable $50 in 1994, though you could also get the Tetris set for $75. At the top right is Super Mario Land 2 6 Golden Coins, my favorite Game Boy game of all time. The bottom of the page shows some NES games which were still surprisingly being sold in 1994. Even more surprising is that you could get a few NES games back then for just $10. Granted, they weren't very good games, but it's neat to see brand new NES games being sold that cheap. One of my favorites of the portable consoles, here's the Sega Game Gear, which I've been the proud owner of for 21 years. I really need to start collecting some more games for my Game Gear, including Echo the Dolphin, which looks pretty intriguing. Sega was still trying to push their failing Sega CD system in 1994, which was being sold for $230 in this catalog. My favorite of all the games listed here is Sonic CD, the first Sonic game I ever played, although it was on Windows 95. This page features some Sega Genesis games, including an ad saying you could reserve a copy of Sonic & Knuckles for $10, which was released on October 18th of 1994. And we've reached the back page of the catalog, which features one of my favorite consoles ever, the Super Nintendo. Also shown here is the Super Game Boy, one of my favorite additions for the Super Nintendo, which allows you to play Game Boy games on the TV. This page also lists the 2 locations for the local Toys R Us stores in Columbia, South Carolina, where this catalog came from. Well, that concludes this video. Tomorrow is Christmas Day, and I hope you're prepared because tomorrow's video is going to be my longest video ever made, clocking in at over 2.5 hours. Get some Christmas cookies ready, sit back and relax because you don't want to miss tomorrow's video. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful Christmas Eve, and I'll see you here tomorrow. Until then, this is Billy Core, signing off. Thank you for visiting the Nostalgia Mall. If you liked what you saw, please like, subscribe, and follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also support me on Patreon if you would like. The links to all of these are down below. Until next time, this is Billy Core wishing you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.